Tactics in Football Manager can be complicated. With so many different options and different footballing styles that your team can play, it's hard to always know which one is going to be the right one that works for your teams. But today I'm going to try and help you with your tactics by giving you 5 quick tips that you can use to improve your tactical game. Now, the tips I'm about to show you will hopefully apply to experienced and new players, and players that use the tactical presets that the game provides, or even people who make their own tactics like this one that I'm using here in my Leipzig save. Now, as we go through the 5 tips in today's video, I want you to let me know in the comments how many of these you are already doing so we can see if there are any tactical masters out there, and drop down below your favorite tactical tip as well to help anybody watching and improving their tactical game. So hopefully then we'll have the 5 tips in the video and a bunch more in the comments for other people to look at. If you do go on to enjoy the video, make sure you smash the like button for us and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But with that being said, let's get into tip number 1. And this is something that I think will definitely benefit both experienced and new players. It's something that I see people not doing anywhere near enough. It's something that can really help see out your games and earn you a few extra points across the course of a season. And it's all about how you see a game out. So whether you're a good team like Leipzig or whether you're a team in the 5th division of English football trying to survive relegation, this tip will apply to you. And it's particularly important when you're leading a match and you want to see the game out. Now, many people, if we just fill in this team with our best 11 for now, if we were winning with this side out on the pitch in this tactical shape and we had, 10 minutes to go against Bayern Munich and we wanted to make sure they didn't score, what I would have done in my early days playing Football Manager, and what many people do, is they go into the mentality section and switch it from what is normally balanced, positive or attacking to defensive or very defensive, in the hopes that it's a little bit like FIFA or FC, where you drop it down to part the bus or ultra defensive and suddenly it's really hard for the opposition to break you down. And you would think that would work, and technically it does try and do what it says on the tin. It will make your players play more defensively, but often it actually invites more pressure than you'd actually want and will lead to you conceding more than if you just played your normal game and kept in your mentality of positive, balanced or attacking. So instead of dropping your mentality down to defensive or very defensive, which affects the whole team, I think you're better off doing something like this. If you are in an attacking mentality, maybe drop it down to positive or balanced, but I wouldn't go any deeper than that. And what I'd focus on is, instead of just dropping back and letting the other team attack you and going all out defense, is instead try and control the game a little bit better as time wears on. So let's say originally we were in this attacking mentality. Yes, maybe you can drop it back down to positive or something like that, but then I'll go into the in possession section. What I'd be looking to do in this section is to drop the passing directness a little bit, so we're playing shorter passes. We're not trying any expansive long balls where we might end up conceding possession and allowing the other team to attack us. I would also look to lower the tempo a little bit to try and slow the game down, and if you want to, it can sometimes cause an issue, but if you want to add time wasted in the last 5 to 10 minutes, it's something you can potentially do to try and see the game out that I think will benefit you far more in actually keeping hold of a lead than just dropping your mentality. On the same note, you might want to adjust player roles as opposed to changing the tactic itself. So let's say Gertrude here was on the attack duty. As you got into the final minutes of the game, you might switch him to defend instead of changing a whole team's mentality and making them all sit back, because you still want to hold your team structure and shape. You still want them to be familiar with the tactics so they play at the best level, and I think this is a much better way to go when you're seeing a game out than just dropping the mentality and hoping for the best. So we've gone for a little bit more of an in-depth tip for tip number 1, but tip number 2 I'm going to make very simple. It's something that you can do with a couple clicks of a button that will raise your chances of winning the match by a million times across the course of the season, really. And it's something that just bothers me so much when I see people not doing it, because it's so obvious, but the game kind of hides it a little bit. And it's all about the player roles that your players are operating in training sessions. So let's take Baumgartner here. We want him to play as a shadow striker on the attack duty. That's apparently his best role in the system, and that's where he's going to be playing more often than not. So naturally, if you think about this in real life football, if you know that you wanted Baumgartner here to play as a shadow striker in training week in and week out, you would want him to be doing the same. What so many people aren't doing is going into a player's development into the training tab and making sure that they are actually training the role that they're playing in match, as I've done here with shadow striker. So often you will just see it set to say attacking midfield centre. If you're not doing anything manually, that's usually what it will be set to. Now, that's going to affect you in a bunch of ways. One, in terms of the player's development. So firstly, if you want him to be a shadow striker, you want him to develop in that role so he hones in on the attributes needed for that position. As you can see, a bunch more attributes are going to be focused in on during his training. On top of that, obviously it's going to make him more familiar with the role as well. If Baumgartner is playing as the shadow striker, but in training he's actually, training to be in the Mazzala role, that's going to affect him massively because he's not going to have the familiarity with the role that you actually want him to play on the pitch week in, week out. Familiarity is a thing that affects your tactics. You can see it up here. The longer a player plays in a tactic, the more he knows his position, the more familiar he is, and the more likely he'll be to play at the level that you want him to. The only way I would say that you shouldn't be doing this is if you are playing him as a shadow striker, but maybe one day you want him to be playing a different position, whether it's Mezzala or whatever it is. So yes, maybe in training you'll allow him to focus in on that role, but just because he's already a natural in this shadow striker position doesn't mean that I would start training him somewhere else for the sake of it. I think if you've got a player and you know where they're going to play in your system, make sure they're doing it in training, because if you don't set that manually, there's a good chance they won't be doing it and they'll likely just have the position itself that they're training, and in that case it's not going to help them in the in-game engine as much as that simple switch to having him focus on the role that he actually plays in your team's system. For tip number 3 though, I'm moving on to my Spurs save that I have as part of a rebuild that I did on my channel, which is linked in the description if you want to see it. We're a few years in here, but I wanted to switch over to this one because I think the tactic that we're playing and the players we have will help me highlight my point a little bit better. And this is all about making sure that your tactics are making use of your players' strengths, which sounds obvious, but not a lot of people do this because a lot of people have their set tactical system and they decide that's what they want to play and the players have to conform to that. The same way, Postecoglou at Spurs, he has his system, right? Everyone has to play that way. Arteta at Arsenal, whatever it is. But that isn't always the best way to go in Football Manager, particularly if you're not at a big club and you're not a few years in. For example, if you're in non-league, you might just want to be getting promoted. You might not be too bothered about the tactic that you're using. The same way a team like, let's say, Spurs here, 3 years in, yes, I'm able to start building a team that suits the tactic I want. But in year 1, I don't have all the players that I want to work with. And for that reason, sometimes you just have to adjust your tactic to get the best out of some of your players' strengths. Now, let's use Brennan Johnson as an example in this save. We could just kind of look at him if we want to and just take his attributes on a base level and forget about it. But really, if we want to get the most out of our players, we need to be taking a look at what they're good at, which sounds simple, but a lot of people don't adjust their instructions based on this information. So we can see Brennan Johnson is a very quick player, 16 pace and 16 acceleration. On the other wing, Yeremy Pino has 15 acceleration, 16 pace, so he is also pretty quick. Now at this stage of my save, I don't feel like I need to adjust my tactic all that much. I feel like I'm pretty happy with where we're at and we're developing nicely. But let's say you had a player similar to Brennan Johnson in non-league where he had all the pace and the acceleration in the world, but maybe he doesn't actually have any technical attributes that really are going to help him, then you might want to just exploit those strengths that he has and take away from his weaknesses by adapting your game. So what you could do is go to your tactical style and you might want to focus on passing into space. That way you're going to be playing into the space for your players to run onto, as opposed to waiting on them to dribble past a man or play a ball through the lines, which might not be qualities that they're able to have. On the same note, you might have a winger, let's say Yeremy Pino, who was really good when it comes to his technical attributes, but let's imagine he isn't actually very quick and he's just someone that has all the ball playing ability in the world, really good technically, but is never going to beat a man based on his physicality. Well, in that case, you might want to focus on those technical attributes. So instead of passing into space, you might want to lower the tempo a little bit, play shorter passes, and wait for him to create chances that way. Now, obviously, this goes a little bit towards your tactical principle as a whole, but you can also adjust the individual instructions to get the most out of your players too. Take Pedro Porro, someone that if you look at him, yes, he's a forward-thinking fullback, and you might just leave it at that. You might not want to get too bogged down in the individual instructions, but I think you're missing out if you don't do so. So we know he's a good crosser, we know he likes to bomb forward, it suits his player traits as well. We're taking that information in, and now we can adapt our tactic to make sure that it's something that we're making use of. So Pedro Porro, I'm going to be asking him to cross more often. We know he can hit a really good cross, so we want to make sure he is getting those chances to play the ball in. For that reason, I think I'd want him to run wide with the ball as well, and then we can make sure that takes place, and we should start seeing some more improvement in Pedro Porro's game because we're getting the most out of what his attributes suggest that he's good at, as opposed to just giving him that basic wing back on the attack instruction and leaving it at that. Now, don't get conned into thinking you need to do something in every section with every player. You don't need to, tick all these boxes here. What that's going to do is it's going to add too many instructions and it's going to weaken your player's game. And you don't have to do it for every player either. Just take a look at some of those guys that you think, you know what, maybe the tactic doesn't suit them. Maybe there's something we need to change to get the most out of them. And you'll get really good results. You can do it with your striker as well, of course. That's a big position. So currently he's got no individual instructions on. Samuel Meroidian has pace, he has area ability. So let's see if we could potentially adapt our tactics to get the most out of him. One thing I'm thinking is crosses, because he is so good in the air. Maybe it would be better to actually play balls in the air as opposed to low crosses. You might want to go for floated or whip crosses. Obviously, you need to think about it. You need to think if it's going to affect your team as a whole, but make sure your tactic suits your players and not the other way around, your players suiting your tactic. Because I promise you, if you do the first one, you'll get better and quicker results, and you won't have to wait to get the perfect players to make your tactic work. Moving on to tip number 4 though, and we head back to our Leipzig save, and we're going less conceptual with this one and more just a simple thing that you can implement into your team, into your tactical systems to make sure you're getting more wins. And it's all about having game plans ready for certain situations. Now, you don't have to go this extreme if you don't want to. You could maybe just have one other game plan. But one thing that I see a lot of people doing is suddenly they're losing a game and they'll decide, you know what, we need to go attacking. Let me go into my tactics screen mid-match, change it to very attacking and just throw some bodies forward and hope that will do something. Now, it very well might do, but if you are going to do anything like this, you want to make sure these are tactical systems and circumstances that your players are already trained for, and you can do this very easily by creating free copies of your tactic for different situations so you can react quicker than the AI depending on the match circumstance, and also not have to worry about your players not knowing what's going on when you're chasing a game or trying to hold on to it. So if we go back to roughly what we had before, let's say this is the tactic that we want to play. Instead of just having this one tactic and then in the game just quickly switching it to be, that attacking style that I just showed you, have your match plans ready. So we can click on this button here, we can go to copy and copy the tactic we've already got, and then do the same to create 3 copies of a tactic that we're operating with, and then we can adjust them for different circumstances. So we can have one ready for when we're chasing a game. Maybe we want to go very attacking. Obviously, this isn't a tactic that anyone wants to be playing, but I'm just showing it as an example. Let's say you wanted to do this, right, when you're chasing a game, get more bodies forward, maybe you want another shadow striker, another body in the box, whatever it might be. Have that ready, because now your players will be training that, and when the time comes that you have to quickly switch to it, not only will it already be ready so you can react quicker than the AI. Let's say you go a goal down with 5 minutes to go, you can quickly switch to this with one button click. It's already ready to go. The players have trained it and they're ready to go and attack the game and give them more of a chance of winning, because again, going back to it earlier, we'll have more familiarity in our tactic. The same way you might have a game plan for when you're leading the game and you want to see it out. So you might end up dropping one player back here. Maybe you switch it to a 4-2-3-1 kind of system. Who knows what you go for, but if that was what you wanted to do, again, you're training it and you're ready to go. Linking back to tip number 1 earlier, this can already have less tempo, shorter passing, maybe a bit of time wasting on it as well. And what you'll notice on top of this benefit of it just being a little bit more defensive and being ready to go is that it's less intense than tactic 1 as well. So if you're ever leading a game with 10 minutes to go 3-0, switch to it, save the intensity, save your players' fitness, reduce chances of injuries, and give you a better chance of winning games that way. So it is really beneficial to have these tactics ready to go. Of course, if you are someone that wants 3 totally different shapes that you want to switch to all the time, you'll be taking up your slots by doing this, so maybe it's not something you want to do. But I think having these game plans ready to go is so useful. Again, it means you can react quicker than the AI does, and your players will already know what they're going to do when they're losing a game, when they're winning a game, and that means when you ask them to do it, they'll likely perform better and give you more chance of getting the result that you expect when making these tactical changes. And speaking of changes, that leads us nicely on to tip number 5, and it's probably one of my biggest tactical bugbears in Football Manager, probably more so than things like overloading your tactics. Some people think you need to have a million different things clicked. Actually, that might give you less chance of winning the game because you're asking your team to do too much and they're going to struggle with it. But no, the thing that bothers me the most, and something I see all the time, is people not giving their tactics any time to be learned. So many people think they can plug in a tactic the day before a game, see how their players play, and if it doesn't work, they assume the tactic's bad. But I've already mentioned familiarity enough times. It is something that your players need to learn. Now, if you have a bad tactic, no matter how much your players learn it, it might not work. But eventually, if you have a tactic that you think could work, you appreciate what it does, and you know what you're trying to do with it, once your players become familiar, there's a much higher chance that they're going to play it at a better level. Now, I actually haven't checked this already, so I might be making myself look stupid here. But when we first started with Leipzig in this save, you can see we did struggle quite a lot when we started using this tactic. We got a couple of friendly draws, and then we ended up beating an amateur team. We lost to Bayern Munich, and you can see the form has been very iffy. Now, granted, we have improved the team at the same time, but over time, you could see we've started to adapt to the tactic, and we started winning more games. Yes, there's a loss to Bayern Munich, but we're getting more comfortable as time went on. We've managed to improve our league position as well. And whereas before in pre-season we're drawing 1-1 with teams we should be beating, now in our next pre-season we went and won the Club World Cup. We beat a bunch of teams, and then eventually, yes, we did draw a few matches 1-1. But obviously circumstances play a part. That might have been our rotation side, whatever it might have been. But either way, what I'm trying to say is when you've got a tactic, don't give up on it on minute 1 after it loses a few games. I think you want to give a tactic at least a month in Football Manager before you discard it. Give it a few games for your players to get used to it, give it some time. The easiest way to tell if a tactic is going to fail or not is looking at this analysis graph here and seeing if there's any glaring weaknesses. Now, on the pitch, there's only a couple of issues for us, so we're fine. If we suddenly decided we were playing something like this, obviously the analysis graph will tell us there's an issue, and that's the sign of a bad tactic. But realistically, if you give your tactics some time, you will start to see results, or at least more results than you would have got at first. It makes total sense, and most people, when they think about it, realize, oh yeah, I just need to give it time. But so many times you'll see people switch their tactic up instantly, not think about it, and assume that the tactic is terrible. But sometimes it just needs a bit of time to work. Let your players gain familiarity, let them get used to it, and then you'll see better results on the pitch. Don't give up on a tactic after only a few games. But there we go. That's my 5 tactical tips to help you level up your game in FM. Hopefully it brings you more wins, more draws, more points, more titles, and more success. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.